Hello beautiful bibliophiles, it's Nektaria, and today I am very glad to be able to talk to you about the books I read in March. I hope you're all doing well, and why don't you comment your favorite March read down below. So first of all, can we just talk about how March was endless? I'm pretty sure it was the longest month in human history. It lasted at least 3 lifetimes, I swear. Perhaps exactly because to me it felt like it lasted that long, I read the most books I've read in a month this year, this March. I mean, not many months have happened this year, but it's still the most books I read in a month this year and in a long time. So I'm very excited because I read 10 books this month. So to that contributed the fact that most of them were poetry collections. I'm pretty sure 6 out of 10 were poetry collections, so they were shorter. And they were, most of them, again, modern poetry collections. So, again, they were easier to read in a shorter amount of time. But still, I'm so hyped. And 9 out of 10 books were arcs because Nektaria is something that was introduced to me this month, past month, but... And I got so many earcs and I was so hyped. But with no further ado, let's get to the books. My only physical read this month was Arthur Rimbaud's Season in Hell. I've read another poetry collection by him called Illuminations, and I definitely liked this one better than Illuminations. It's still not exactly like my favorite kind of poetry, so he isn't getting a place in the list of my favorite poets of all time, but I still very much enjoyed it. I really like this edition because it has the original text in French and then the quick translation. I'm not sure, but I think these kind of books are called bilingual. I'm not sure. So I was able to try to exercise my French a bit because I was reading the French prototype and then I got to the quick translation. It was very interesting and it made it a very special reading experience for me. So I really enjoyed that. So this poetry collection has, well, it's very sad, it's very depressing because it's Arthur Rimbaud, of course, but it was a lot about morality, about how corrupted we get living our lives and how we either try to be as farther from sin as we can, or sometimes we just want to sin. So it was very interesting, it was a very interesting concept. It was very sad, but I think it was quite enjoyable and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Now let's get to the arcs. Most of them are already out. If some of them aren't, I'll be telling you when they come out. Allow me to get my reading journal because I'm bad at remembering 10 books. Oh, do you like the March thing? I think it was cute. Anyway, so the first arc I want to talk about is The Goths by Leon Hall. It's a YA contemporary and it's been a while since I enjoyed a YA contemporary this much. This follows this all-girls prestigious school. After this girl's Yin disappears, and by disappears I mean she gets abducted, and people are trying to find out where she went, who kidnapped her, and stuff like that, but mostly it follows the aftermath of her abduction, because we follow a female cast, because it's an all-girls school, and we mostly follow 2 girls, Chloe and Natasha. They're very different, but we follow how the abduction has affected the whole school, and them in particular, and it's very interesting. It was a very feminist read because it was a lot about how there's so much pressure in society for young girls to take care of themselves and be careful not to get abducted, not to get assaulted, instead of telling men to not assault women. And it had that perspective a lot, and it was very interesting. And it was also a lot about how different kind of women and young girls treat this subject differently, and to me it was very special, very intriguing, and it followed the dynamics of friendships a lot, which was also very nice. And we have this art contest that gets in the middle of it all, and it was a very interesting read. I'd highly recommend it. Very feminist, a bit dark, but very intriguing, and I'd highly recommend it. Next I have another 5-star read, this time a poetry collection, a modern poetry collection, again, Irk, Butcher by Natasha T. Miller. This was very interesting. It had a lot of very dark and raw and hard-hitting but very original concepts in her poems. It's about her experiences as a black woman a lot. It's a lot about racism. The poems also talk a lot about problems like homophobia, police violence, and the toxic way in which everyday people react to those kind of behaviors. And also there were a lot of like very sad and emotional poems about grief and loss that like were about the poet's personal experiences, which was very interesting, very depressing, but very interesting. And I very much enjoyed those as well. In general, I thought her poems were very well done and well written, and like the concepts were very original as well and very, very interesting. So I gave it 5 out of 5 stars because I really enjoyed it. It has been a while since I enjoyed a modern poetry collection this much, so I was very hyped. And I also enjoyed the next modern poetry collection I read enough to give it 5 out of 5 stars. It's one of my favorite poetry collections I read this month actually. It's called Please Come Off Book by Kevin Cantor. It's also the first book I read by a non-binary author, which I'm very happy about, but I'm also very ashamed of myself that, I mean, I've been living in this planet reading books for 18 years and I hadn't read a book by a non-binary author before. I've been trying to diversify my reads in the recent years, like I've been trying a lot to do that. So I'm going to try and read more books by non-binary authors because I think it's a very important representation that we need to see more in literature, and that needs to be more accessible, like in bookstores everywhere. So I'd really like to do that. To the collection itself, Please Come Off Book, I thought it was a very smart, genius poetry collection. A lot of poems had very original concepts I hadn't seen before in modern poetry and in poetry as well. And I was very intrigued because I was reading it and then I was like, whoa, oh my god, that's so smart. Like, I see what they did there. That's genius. And I really enjoyed that. There were also a lot of poetry about social issues and a lot about how the author has been treated as a non-binary person. So I thought all the poems were very, very beautifully done, very well executed, and I'd really like to read everything else Kevin Cantor comes up with because I really enjoyed this poetry collection. Now we have 3 novels to break the poetry down a bit. First of all, I have Mercurial, that's a lot of R's and L's. Anyways, Mercurial by Naomi Hughes. This is a fantasy novel. It's set in this kind of empire where the destroyer rules. I mean, her sister is the official queen, but the destroyer, as her name shows, is this very creepy tyrant. She's so just mean and she kills everything that comes her way, and oh my gosh, she's just very scary. And Tal, our protagonist, is her bodyguard. I mean, I don't want to say bodyguard, but that's what he's, her protector, let's say, because he's connected to her through this oath that was given to him by the god he believes in. Anyways, it's a bit weird, but the point is he's connected with her through this oath that pretty much just stops him from being unable to protect her. He just always does anything and kills everyone to protect her. But the whole of the world is against her pretty much because she's a tyrant, and along with the people who try to bring her down is Tal's sister Nyx. And when Tal gets the opportunity to overthrow the destroyer, when she's powerless and the oath doesn't really work for him, is he going to do it? Is he going to kill the destroyer who brings so much misery and fear and death to people's lives? Or has he connected to her to a point where he doesn't want to kill her? What is his sister gonna think of him? What is he gonna do? It's interesting to see. I liked how there's obviously a romance, but I like how it was quite discreet. I don't like romance to be very all over the place in fantasy. I don't like that. So that was really cool, and there was also a sapphic romance going on in the background, which was really cool. So this was quite an enjoyable fantasy. It didn't absolutely blow my mind, so I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next novel I have is Hive by Jeremiah Ukponrefe. I hope I pronounced his name right. Sorry if I didn't. This is a post-apocalyptic sci-fi. It's the first book in the series, but the second book comes out in 2022, so you got time till that. And because I hadn't read sci-fi in a while, I was very excited when the author reached out to me. So I was very excited. This follows the world after it has been destroyed by an alien force, the Hive. But the Hive has also been brought down, and there's this military group who pretty much just tries to control the world and make sure there are no signs of the Hive left, and also keep the people in order. I mean, they get quite brutal and creepy with people. I didn't really like that. So anyways, we follow Alex. He's in this whole military group, And we follow another cast of characters as well, as they try to make sure that the hive has been completely destroyed, but pretty much it hasn't. It's still quite strong, and that's the point of the story, how they try to bring it down. So this was like a very, very, very military-centric sci-fi, not my cup of tea really. It was like too violence, weapons, military, not things I'm invested in usually. I found the characters pretty unlikable. Maybe it was because they were killing people the whole time, because, well, they're in the military. Anyways, I don't know. Not exactly my cup of tea, but I'd recommend it for people who like watch a lot of action movies and they want to get into reading, but they're like very reluctant because they feel like they've been really used to like vivid images changing quickly and lots of violence, so they don't think they could enjoy a book. I'd suggest this book for those people. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars because it wasn't really my cup of tea. The last novel for today is Dirt Circus League by Marie Kimberly. This also has already come out. I mean, all of the books I've already mentioned have already come out. So this was this book about this girl, Asha, I'm never sure how to pronounce that name. Anyways, this girl starts her work with her family. She has to move in with her dad in a different town, and in this town there's this group of outsiders, the Dirt Circus League, and they have this kind of league, but it's also a cult, kind of. And, well, she sees them because they fight, like, they have this performance where they fight each other in order to, like, collect money to go live in their secluded area. And then she wants to join them because she finds them very intriguing, and real life is not going really well for her, so she wants to join in. And, well, they're getting quite creepy because they worship Gaia, like Earth, but they do that in a very creepy way and in a very dangerous way, and it's weird. And I was very intrigued by that. That is why I read the book. Because stories about cults are always like have this creepy vibe and they're very interesting to me. But this one, I was not very fond of the execution of it. I mean, the protagonist, she keeps mentioning how she doesn't want the real life back. She just wants to stay with the League. But every time she just talks about how she misses real life and the League is weird and she doesn't like a lot of people there. And yeah, she keeps mentioning that that is where she feels like she belongs, but she never like gives an explanation for that. She's just like, oh no, I belong here, I'm gonna stay here. But I'm pretty sure the real reason why she stays there is because she has a crush on the leader, because that's the only thing she seems to like there. It's weird. Also, I mean, it's pretty predictable to see what happens, and even though the protagonist has this gift of like being able to see things that are going to happen, she totally misses out on like obvious things of why the League is so dangerous, and it's very hard to believe that her character is so naive. And it's just weird because like she should be able to predict those things and she just doesn't, and it's weird. And I felt like the plot was like being developed very hastily, like it was going really fast and things were happening, but not a lot of explanations were given for them. So yeah, it was a bit of a bad execution for me, so I had to give it 2 out of 5 stars. Going back to poetry collections, I have Everybody Don Colomental, I'm not sure, by Tolu A. Akinyemi. This was an interesting poetry collection. It was a lot about mental illness, it was a lot about the social restrictions societies put on people, especially in specific countries, and it was very interesting to see. Trigger warning for mental illness, by the way. But like the execution, like the lyrics weren't absolutely blowing my mind away like in the other poetry collections I've talked about so far. And also I had to take an entire star out because of one poem called Guilty as Charged. And in this poem, I believe like the poet wants to talk about how there are a lot of false and targeted accusations for crimes, especially in his like country. However, he chose as an example of the crime, I don't want to say it, I'm gonna write it here. You probably know which crime I'm referring to. It's a very sensitive topic, so I'm pretty sure you got it. And he uses that as an example of a false accusation, and like dude, you just don't do that. Obviously there have been false accusations of that, but when you talk about sexual assault and sexual violence, I don't think there's a point in making it convicted person centric instead of victim centered. So it really upset me, and it really just annoyed me, and annoyed me in the way that it made me feel uncomfortable, because like he has this lyric about how when you're convicted of the word, you're either guilty or guilty, and I didn't like how he said that, because I get how he wanted to talk about false accusations for all kinds of crimes, but he just could have used another example, because this is very upsetting and inappropriate. It can make people feel like very, very uncomfortable, and like, I mean, you just don't treat survivors or victims of sexual assault and violence that way. I don't know, I feel like he handled it very, very wrong, so it made me very upset. So I had to take an entire star out, so I gave this poetry collection 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next up, I have Alt Monarch by Courtney Mary Andrews. I really enjoyed this one. It's definitely one of my favorite poetry collections I read this month. This one comes out April 6th, but it's probably already out by the time you're watching this. It was so sweet. It was just so like nostalgic and bittersweet and soft, and it made my heart very happy. And it was very much about nostalgia of childhood. It was about trying to survive and live your life and while enjoying the nature and everything around you. And it was very sweet, very needed to read something such comforting and sweet and lovely. It just made my heart very happy, and I'd highly recommend it if you want something to read and make you very emotional but also make you feel very good. And the last book for today is Maps for the Modern World by Valerie June Hockett. And this one was a very interesting reading experience, because I have been getting much more into like modern poetry, and by modern I mean modern day, not modern as in the history of poetry. Modern poetry has been starting since like the second half of the 20th century or something, maybe even earlier. That I always consider poetry, but modern day nowadays poetry I have some struggle with sometimes. Like, I've been making a lot of stats and I've been considering a lot more things poetry than I used to. There's already things like Milk and Honey by Ruby Kaur, which I don't consider poetry. Like, I consider it beautiful quotes but not poetry. Yes, I'm one of those people. I'm sorry. And some of Valerie June Hockett's poems in this one I did consider poems very much, but a lot of others were like two-line quotes, which I consider beautiful, but beautiful quotes, not poems. And also there was a lot of that, I like to call that space bar poetry. I'm not sure if whether that's an official term, but that's what I like to call it, where there's like beautiful sentences and you just put a space bar to make it look like poetry when it doesn't have other characteristics of poetry. Like, I don't want them to rhyme. Like, I don't mind if they don't rhyme. Most of my favorite poets don't rhyme, so I don't mind that, but still, they don't qualify as poetry for me most of the time. So yeah, half of Maps for the Modern World for me was poetry, but the other half was just beautiful quotes, which did not make me like it any less. I still very much enjoyed it. It had this kind of self-help book vibe to it, because it was a lot about self-empowerment and self-growth and like moving on from things that have hurt you and boosting your self-confidence. And it was very soothing to read. I also listened to this on audiobook while reading it, and it was a great experience because the author was narrating it herself, and she was narrating it with so much passion and love for her poems, and it was just gorgeous. Also, like, in the book, they're just these like tiny little sketches, which are so cute, and I love them. So yeah, this was a very interesting reading experience, even though I didn't consider 100% of it poetry, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars because I enjoyed it. Those were the 10 books I read in March. I've been talking for a long time. I'm so sorry if you got bored. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave your favorite March reads down in the comments. Again, thank you so much. Have a great day or night if you're watching this at night. Have a great week, a great April, and I'll see you soon with another video. Bye!